The opinions expressed in the following program are those of the producer and not necessarily those of WKTV Community Media.
Hello, West Michigan. This is Grand Tap Media Business TV. My name is Pamela Keim, your host. The spirit of the show is to introduce West Michigan to all the businesses, nonprofits, individuals that can help us thrive in our lives. We have a very, very special guest for you today. I've been wanting this person on my show for some time, and we reconnected out once post-COVID happened, and I found out that she has written a book. You might know this person if you ever watch WOOD TV and want to know the weather, the bus stop weather forecast for your children. Well, she is here today to tell us what the weather is today and also to talk about her book that she's had out for about a year. And for all you empty nesters out there that might be experiencing that or some type of transition, this is the book you're going to want to get. This is Terri DeBoer's book called Brighter Skies Ahead. So I want to welcome to the show Terri DeBoer. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Pamela. I have been so much looking forward to sitting down and chatting with you together. You're someone I really admire what you do in this community.
That means a lot.
And I feel like this show is a lot like what I do on 8 West. So wearing that hat at WOOD TV, along with being a meteorologist, I'm a co-host of 8 West as well. And I feel like this show does a lot of the same kinds of segments and reporting that we do on 8 West. So it's really a thrill for me to be here with you today.
The reason we want to get going to with your book, The Brighter Skies Ahead, and it is a book about, tell us right there, share with us why, for those, kind of share a little bit about yourself a little bit. I didn't go into much detail because I know that your time is so valuable and I'm so happy that you're here. But to talk about the book and why you became an author, so let's start with there.
So I'm a big reader. I love to read, and I know you love to read too. We have a passion for books. I grew up reading a lot. Of course, you know, we grew up before there was the internet and before there were digital media files. And I would, you know, I often when I was in elementary school and junior high school, my mom would drop me off on a Saturday morning at the library, the public library, and I would just hang out there all day with the books. I just love books. And so a lot of people who are big readers have a dream of becoming a writer someday. And in fact, they say, 85% of Americans would love to write a book, which is a great big number. And so I just always had this dream to write a book, and I kept thinking, what am I going to write about? What am I going to write about? I read almost exclusively nonfiction. I have friends now who are fiction, romance novelists, and so I'll read their books, but I like to read books that talk about how people have made the decisions they have in life and how their lives and the journeys of their lives have unfolded. And I love biographies and autobiographies. And so I thought, well, I need to write a nonfiction book. What am I going to write about? So a lot of people know by watching me on TV, my kids.
I will have to interrupt you. You do have a lot of fans. My friend Colleen Kroll over here, when she knew I was interviewing you, she was just lights right up, and I just love her.
Oh,
but a lot of us grew up
so
like
flattering.
You did, grew up in the same generation, and we all were raising our families at the same time.
Yeah, and you know, it's so busy every day. You know, you feel like you have more hours. You know, more stuff to do than you have hours in the day, and every day is just like this. You're a hamster on a hamster wheel. You know, I had 3 kids. They never met a sport they didn't like, and so that meant often divide and conquer from the sports to all their other activities. And and you think that this is going to go on forever because this series of almost unending days does seem like it goes on forever. But then when your youngest eventually leaves home and goes to college, you're left with all of a sudden your life goes from I've got too much to do and not enough time to too much time and not enough to do. And I felt like my purpose in life for all those years had been to be a mom. And then when my kids
it's a huge
were
purpose.
gone, it sure is.
It is a huge purpose, and I will tell you, I felt the same. I want to give you this scenario, and then you're going to relate to this. when my youngest son was graduating, the day of his graduation, I literally was in the parking lot calling a friend, weeping, because I couldn't believe that this season was over.
Yeah.
It's been such a big part of my life because, you know, if you have a couple children, I had 4.
Right.
So I've been going through this for a long time. And I don't know why, Terry, I was crying. I should have been joyful that, you know, this, some people sees this as a burden, and I just thought it was so, my life had meaning and purpose beyond what I ever expected it to be.
Right. You know,
Can
and
you share with that?
And you know, and it's so interesting, especially because when your kids are active and involved and engaged, they're sort of like your hobby. I mean, of course, you know, you're there to help take care of them, get them to where they need to be. You're the maid, the nurse, the housekeeper, you know, sometimes the tutor. You know, you're all of that for them. But then they give you so much activity, and you know, you have a full schedule. Your calendar is packed, and so all of a sudden you go. I mean, and literally, it changes in an instant when that youngest one finally leaves. I mean, you gradually empty the nest. My kids, my oldest was 8 years older, is 8 years older than the youngest, and so I did it for almost 30 years with a very full nest. You know, and at the same time working, you know, my alarm clock goes off at 2:30 every morning.
I was wondering what time you start today.
I know. I get up at 2:30 to the station by 3:30 to get everything ready, you know, and prepare the graphics, do the forecast. As a meteorologist, I'm responsible for all of that. I also have a lot of radio partners, and so I have to record forecasts for them and their listeners before we ever hit TV, and our show starts at 4:30. So, I mean, it's a very early day. And so, but I love my job. I love my career. I love the mornings. I love morning television and the pace of it all. Even with all those years of getting very little sleep many nights.
Yeah.
And but because my day starts so early, it ends early too. So most days I'm home from work by noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And when my kids were at home, I would spend those hours, you know, between noon and 1 o'clock, getting everything ready, and then go picking them up, go to their activities, their sports, their practices, games, those kinds of things. But when my youngest left, all of a sudden my afternoons were empty, and I had nothing to do. And so, I mean, there were literally, and I think I shared this with you, I will, you know, I'm an open book. There would be days that I would come home from work at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, change into my pajamas, climb on the couch with, you know, pint of ice cream, and turn on the Hallmark channel. Sometimes it was a glass of wine. Most of the time it was ice cream, or, you know.
Right.
And
well, that was your evening, right? When you got off at 1, it's kind of your evening.
Right, it sort of is like that. And so, and after a couple of weeks, because my husband works more traditional 9 to 5, so he wouldn't get home till 5:30 or 6 o'clock. So I had kind of this void in the afternoon of how to spend my time. And it just really started to wear on me. And then I finally started thinking about it, and I thought, you know, there has to be a book about this, right? About this whole empty nest transition, because, you know, that's what we do when we love to read.
Right.
So I went to the library, found a couple of books. They were very depressing. They didn't speak to me the way I needed to have a book. And then I thought, well, you know what, if I'm still married to my same husband. My kids have been successful. I'm very proud of each one of them. I have a career I love. I'm very involved in the community. If I'm feeling this emptiness inside, this has to be more universal. And so then I thought, you know, maybe I'll write a book about the empty nest. And so January of 2020, I thought, this is going to be the year. You know, everybody had such hopes for 2020, right? It was the, you know,
well, that is
2020
true.
vision, 2020 purpose, 2020 focus, you know, all of that. And so I reached out to someone I knew at a publisher, and we met for a cup of coffee, and I said, I've got kind of this vision for a book for empty nesters. And so, so long story short, I ended up getting a publishing contract, and then as the world was shutting down, March of 2020, I had a contract and a deadline to get the manuscript done. And so, well, everybody was
a journey for that.
Yeah, everyone was shutting themselves away from the world. You know, fortunately, I suppose at that point, all the restaurants and stores were shut down because I had a big manuscript to write and no place to go. So that's how I spent the pandemic shutdown, writing the first draft of Brighter Skies
So you never
Ahead.
had to go into the studio during the
I
pandemic?
did have to go in. In fact,
so you were essential.
we were considered essential yet. In fact, I think in the glove box of my car, I still have a letter from the Homeland Security Department. Because remember, for a while, if you were driving around early in COVID, you had to have a letter that said you were authorized to be
My husband
out.
had one too.
Yeah,
Yes, because it was in financial.
yes,
backing.
and so I would and we have 5 meteorologists. You know, weather's an essential part of every show,
Every day.
every single show, and so we have 5 meteorologists for all of our shows. Well, Bill Steffen, because at that point there were no vaccines, we didn't really know what we were dealing with. They decided that he would broadcast his portion of the shows from at home, but our technology required to have a meteorologist in the studio to make the graphics and to coordinate with him. So Bill couldn't be on the show, and then Matt Kirkwood fell skiing and broke his hip and had to have hip replacement surgery. So we went from having 5 people to 3 people. So I spent months working 6 days a week. And so I'd go to work, and then as soon as I was off the air, I would come home and climb into a pair of sweatpants and a sweatshirt and sit in my office at home and write.
So luckily that you didn't have your children home. Because you know what I mean? They would all be home.
Yes.
All day with the lockdown, and then
Could
of
you
course
imagine?
doing school. No.
Yeah.
I never had to go through that either.
And I have
couldn't
little,
imagine these
I have
mothers.
a lot of friends and coworkers who have little kids, and it's just my heart goes out to everybody who navigated the last couple years like
Was
that.
your husband essential too?
He was, but he runs an organization that runs correctional facilities, and so they are essential. But because, again, at the time we didn't have vaccines, we didn't really know what we were dealing with. So his key management, he went into kind of a pool with the key management staff, and they rotated working from home and going in. So he was, I think, in the office maybe 2 or 3 days a week, and then working from home.
Did you find it with going through the pandemic, writing the book? I mean, did you think that just either inspired you, or do you think you got a lot more out? I mean, your book is amazing.
Thank you.
And I think it's for everybody that's going through something in their season, and basically not looking in the back of the rear mirror, trying to hold on to nostalgia. And do you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What was your? Did you think that really helped?
So when I was setting out to write the book, I thought I can't not write about COVID, because it really was just I knew that it would be something that, even though the book wasn't being released until 2021, fall of 2021.
Correct.
And who knew what the situation would be, but I felt like I needed to at least address it. So the goal with the book is to be timely and timeless, so that it will, for people, I mean, even this year, people who are getting ready to empty their nests, that it will be still applicable. And so there is a chapter in here called Essential Workers.
Yes,
It's chapter
I know.
6.
I read that, and I'm
because
going. I was looking at that, going, "Wow, is this?" My husband just retired, so I will tell you, even as I'm reading this, understanding that what he's going through, I don't think they really understand. That you don't know what that's going to feel like.
Right, what that transition is going to feel like.
So he had to give up being, the president and CEO of what he was doing to being home every day. Well, yeah, I work from home, so you can imagine that transition.
Right.
I love my husband. We golf every day.
Yes.
Because I promised when we started we'd golf. But
how about that?
Yeah, but I was thinking he's dealing with that. Where is it after 6 months? When golf is over.
Right.
I don't even know what that's going to look like.
What's next for him? Yes, exactly. And and that was the the chapter about essential workers is chapter 6 in here, and I write, during the coronavirus pandemic of 2020, we became familiar with the descriptive category of people in the workforce. The term essential worker became an important part of the American vocabulary. Since the coronavirus was thought to be extremely contagious with no proven effective treatment or cure at the time, governmental leaders around the world issued orders for most people to stay at home to stop or at least slow down the spread of the deadly virus. A separation system was established to identify those who would need to stay home and work, and those who needed to continue to physically show up in their place of business. And so I go on to write a little about that, and then I say, in a way, the empty nester can fall into the category of feeling unessential. In the grand scheme of things, the contributions of parents are a necessary and vital part of an adult child's life. But on a day-to-day basis, a parent who is no longer having a child living at home becomes a little less essential. The parent of an independent child no longer has the responsibility for tending to their child's daily needs like preparing food or doing laundry. Parents can slip into feelings of being irrelevant, but this isn't true. Every parent is essential. We just need to recognize the shift in why we are still essential. To that end, the parent becomes more essential right now than perhaps at any other time in a child's life.
Very good.
Thank you.
And I was going to say, I think with the pandemic, it kind of brought, if you would have been home with your family, it kind of brought you, it's just us. Right now. It was us for over the summer. I had to wait for my husband to come home. He was my lifeline out in the world.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you experienced that too. It's like whenever you walked in the door, so I could get it from social media, but that didn't help my mental state.
Right.
Getting that from that.
I know, well, exactly. Well, so I wrote the book, and then at the same time, I thought, I started journaling a couple years ago, and I had always wished that I had journaled when my kids were young. I wish I could go back and look at that. And so I wrote a companion journal.
And that's what I want to talk about, the power of the word, of your own words. And I stay in the journal, and I was looking at the questions, and I go, I wish I would have had this during the pandemic, just because it would have forced me to do something, you know what I'm saying? To do something. So what do you think, why you included that was that you saw the power of your own notes that you were keeping or writing the book, or your thoughts?
So in 2018, for a Christmas gift for a lot of people, I love to give books for gifts, and I found this really cool journal, and I gave it to probably 20 or 30 people, women who I give to my daughters and to a lot of my friends and acquaintances. And it's a journal by Deborah Cody, who was just, one of my favorite. She and I have since become friends. But it's a 5-year journal. And so every page you open it, and every page has just a few lines for writing the highlights of what happens. So January 1st is a page. And so then you have 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022.
Wow.
And so every year you can look back on that same page of what I was doing. And it was so cool because I started it in 2019.
Okay.
And then as 2020, every day, especially March, April, May, we're going through this just weird time, almost the twilight zone when everything was shut down. I could go back and see, wow, last year at this time, I was in Marquette. Last year at this time, and just know that we didn't have those same options to do all those different things. And then, so 2020 is a very interesting year, but I'm glad I have that written down. And then 2021, as I was gearing up for the release of the book and all of that, I'd have all the excitement. And now so this is year 4 of that 5-year journal that I was keeping.
Okay.
And so it's just interesting. And
well, I'm glad that you did include that, and it made me, the questions, I could easily reword those for David, my husband, and his retirement. But okay, let's just move on. I want to ask you a few more questions here on the thing. Have you ever heard of the quote, I am every age I've ever been?
Oh, I've never heard of that one.
Yes, and I love that quote. It says, I am still every age that I have ever been. Oh. Which I think it's really when you're looking at going through the empty nester and other people coming up that is not hit that, you see those young mothers in church, and you know what I mean, you just like enjoy every minute.
Right.
Every minute.
Well, and they want to probably slap you for saying that, because they're like, I've got a 3-year-old who is on the floor in the cookie aisle at Meijer throwing a fit because I won't buy cookies, and then I've got a teenager who needs a driver's license. It's like all those chaotic times, and you're thinking, we know how fast that time goes, but when you're in the middle of it, you think it's going to go on forever.
Well, and you want to. So if you were that 26-year-old Terri that was in the bathtub, reassessing her life, after making some decisions, I mean, when you look at that, did you ever think that as you were writing the book that you were going you are every age you ever were.
Yeah.
And you take that with you, and you can't explain that to people.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Well, it does make sense, and it's interesting. The book starts out with me writing a letter to myself. I'm a big country music fan, and
Okay.
Brad Paisley had a song many years ago, if he could write a letter to himself when he was a teenager, when he was going through all the times of, I'm going to fail this class, or I got a ticket for running a stop sign, or all these things, ran out of gas. If he could write a letter to himself back then to let him know how his life was going to be, the teenage Brad Paisley, how his life would turn out to be. And so I take sort of poetic license with that to writing a letter to myself when I was 26, which was the year I turned 26, my worst birthday. I just ended my second failed engagement, and all I really wanted to be was at some point a wife and a mother. And I had, at that point, when you're 26, you think, oh, if I'm not married by 26, then
that was a big deal back then.
It was a big deal.
Right.
And
not so much now, but it is a big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
And because the time clock is ticking on your fertility and all those other things. And so I was just thinking, so that year I turned 26, I was still working at Channel 3 in Kalamazoo. And I drove home from work that night, about 11:30 at night. I was still working the evening shift. I had two versions of my career. I started as a television news reporter and a news anchor, and then went back to school to become a meteorologist. And so I was making that transition in my professional career at that point. But I just remember climbing into the bathtub with a bottle of champagne to say, cheers to you, Terri. Your life is, hopefully it will go up from here. And if I could have written a letter to her, or at least given her a little inkling about the life that was ahead for her.
Well, and I think that during the pandemic, we probably all spent our birthdays
in the bathtub?
In the bathtub, alone, looking at, you didn't have the whole world to, and with social media. How do you think that's with women today? And we grew up in a different generation. Thank goodness, I was very happy that social media just started to come into play. Right, I really feel like I've been blessed not to have my children. How do you think when women are looking back at seeing their lives, seeing how glamorous your life must be? You've written a book. I mean, do you get some women? I'm like, oh my gosh, you have so much more than I will ever achieve.
Well, and the interesting thing is, you only see the highlights. It's like I have, yesterday, for example, I threw in a load of laundry into the washing machine.
Terri does laundry.
And then,
look at that.
And then forgot to put it in the dryer, and so I was at home grabbing a quick bite to eat before I came over here to do this interview with you, and I looked in the laundry room and I was like, you idiot, the clothes from yesterday are still in the washing machine. And so then I was like, I have to wash the clothes again because they've been sitting in the washing machine for 24 hours. So
exactly.
Yeah, so it's, so that won't make it onto my Twitter or my Facebook, but it's just, we just put the highlights out there.
We do put the highlights
and
out there.
I'm guilty of this too. I sometimes compare, I left the clothes in the washing machine to someone else's highlight reel, and I think, wow, I'm falling really short of this. It's easy to do.
In the book, let's talk about back to that. You talk about relationships, right? And I will share you. I had an interview. I mean, I listened to Uma Thurman, the actress.
Oh, Uma Thurman.
Yes, and she was commenting on, she's older now, and she's commenting on it, and she actually said, let's just say you don't watch Sex and the City, but let's just say you know of the show. It's about 4 girlfriends that go in New York, and they live this life. And she goes, that's for you young women, that's fairy tale. And she wanted to share with you, it's like you probably will go through your whole life and maybe have 1 or 2 really good friends you can be.
Yeah.
Now, as you wrote the book and you've had people come in and out of your life for seasons.
Right.
Right. I mean, have you discovered throughout your life the same situation where you have 1 or 2 friends that you could really call?
Yeah, I have.
Be Terri with.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Be Terri.
And I have a handful, a few very, and there's a chapter in the book about my enduring friendships, because people do come out of your life for a season. People are in your life for a season, for a reason, for a stage. All the parents that we had, our kids were on, basketball teams and hockey teams with. Those people are your core for a season. You know, maybe it's just one hockey season, maybe it's 2 or 3. And so those are people that you spend a lot of time with, but those maybe aren't going to be your forever friends.
Right.
And, you know, I tell people, you know, look at your wedding photo and think, the people that stood up for you, how close are you? Do you know their phone numbers still? Are those are those still people who are in your inner circle?
Just one.
And
Just one.
Yeah, and I have a few people in my life. You know, my neighbor, kitty corner from me. We had kids the same ages, and our daughters, who are our youngest, she has 6 kids, and I had 3. So I was like, oh man, she lapped the field on that one. But our daughters are still best friends, and because they grew up together. It's been almost 25 years that she's been in my life, and then I've got a couple other very close friends who, you know, they've done life together. I don't see them all the time,
Right.
but we just pick right back up.
Well, it is similar to, you know, I would say when reading your book, and you know, you do the bus stop weather, which all of us lived by. How are we going to dress our children for the school? But I think when it comes down to it is, as you were writing the book and listening to that, is that you're going to be standing there, you're at the bus stop yourself. Now, where do you see yourself?
Yes.
What bus are you going to get on now?
Yeah, I know. I know. I love that. That is a great metaphor. We, you know, and so the book is, you know, it talks about kind of the seasons of life, because life so much mirrors the weather. And so we, instead of calling it, you know, winter, spring, summer, fall, we call it, in the book, the seasons are called growing up, the young adult season, the juggling act season, and then the empty nest season. And as I've been speaking and talking to people and on podcasts and shows like yours, it dawns on me there's another season. What is the season after the empty nest season? And I think this is where your husband is and where you are going to be going together. I'm calling it for myself the encore season. What is next?
What is,
you know, what is next? What in my life? You know, I went to Meyer Gardens last night actually and saw Rick Springfield, and of course, what's the last song that he plays?
Jesse's Girl.
Jesse's Girl. Exactly. It's his best. And sometimes
we all connected to each other because remember that song.
You remember that, and so it's almost like the encore. You think of how bands do it, musical groups. It's almost like you're connecting back to the early days in a different way, because you realize that there's still something hopeful and to be celebrated with that which was in the beginning part of your career and your life and your journey.
Well, I think in your next book too, and I'm sure you've already thought about this, I believe you need to add a chapter on when your parents pass on and you become, I am now to the point where I've buried both of my parents, love them to death, and they're gone, and then my aunts and uncles are all gone. So now we're becoming the head of the family. So when you show up to events, the younger generation is looking at you for some kind of connection to people that have come before us. You know, what was the tradition before, Pamela? What did we use to, you know? And I'm sitting there, I've never been the head of the family, but I'm getting close.
Yes.
And that's a new season of our life, and it kind of brings emotion to that too, that saying goodbye to all your aunts and uncles and that cousins, even cousins now, that were part of our lives that are you're starting to move that journey up, right? It's a different season.
Yes, well, and you realize too that, in fact, I had this conversation with my husband just this afternoon about all the stuff that we collect along the way. You know, like
you talk about the clutter.
The clutter.
In here too.
Yeah.
I want to downsize too.
Yeah.
Where it's going to go, I have no idea.
I have no idea either. So you know, maybe we should just have a giant yard sale right here in the parking lot.
All that stuff is important to me.
Yes.
You know, they do say you should have somebody do it that's not emotionally attached. So let's talk about how they get the book.
Oh, so yes. So
what books you got coming up now?
So it's so the book, so Brighter Skies Ahead, Forecasting a Full Life, When You Empty the Nest, the book and the journal, those are both available. Amazon's probably the easiest. I do love to support local bookstores, though. I'm not sure they all have physical copies, just because, I mean, it's been out for a while, since November of 2021.
Okay.
So if you are interested in having an autographed copy, you can head to my website, terrideboer.com.
We are going to be doing a book dedication for the Granville Library coming up in September. Details to come. We want to thank Terri for that. She's going to launch us out on that. But we want to thank Terri DeBoer here for being here today.
Pamela, thank you.
It was a pleasure. And get her book, Brighter Skies Ahead, and you will not regret it. So this is Pamela Keim, and this is Grand Tap Media, and we will catch you next time. Take care, everyone.
The opinions expressed in the preceding program are those of the producer and not necessarily those of WKTV Community Media.